Grand Central Terminal is much more than just a train station. This majestic structure, located in the geographical center of New York, is a quintessential city icon, a monumental public space that serves as a crossroads, a square, a destination in itself. More than 750,000 people pass through Grand Central every day, but few stop to notice the building's spectacular facade. Now, there is a good reason to look up when entering or exiting the terminal. Grand Central has undergone a remarkable facelift. In the past 2 years, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority has spent $21 million to clean and restore the terminal's exterior. Each of Grand Central's 21,000 blocks of limestone was washed, 2 tons of rusted steel replaced, and 10,000 panes of glass repaired. The terminal's 13-foot wide clock was regilded, and the iconic statue of 3 mythological figures, Mercury, Hercules, and Minerva, received a makeover. The tarps and scaffolding have come down, revealing one of the greatest pieces of Beaux-Arts architecture in America. New York Times Deputy Director of Photography Dave Frank documented the terminal's restoration in a video diary. His footage provides unprecedented views and perspectives of Grand Central's exterior and the workers who labored to return it to its past glory. The biggest and perhaps most difficult part of the Grand Central restoration was removing decades of grime and soot that had accumulated on the terminal's soft limestone exterior. The facade had not been cleaned since the 1970s. Lily Centino, project superintendent, describes the elaborate washing process.
What we did here at Grand Central Terminal to bring out the true color of the stone itself, Indiana limestone. If you know what type of stone this is, you'll understand this type of stone cannot be power washed. People would think naturally you just take the power washer and soak it down and put a chemical. You can't do that with this. What you have to do is set up a series of water jets. Basically take a piece of piping, a plastic piece of piping, and run X amount of feet, 300 feet of piping, and have these little water jets that you would use, let's say, as a garden hose sprayer, but a real fine one. And you'd soak the building anywhere between 3.5 to 5 hours. And in between that time, you would notice whether the impurities were coming out or the impurities were still staying in, deemed on how long you would wash. Then once you finish doing that and you realize the building was soaked enough, you assess the joints of the building. And then you would take the joint and you'd refill these particular joints. And joints, I say, those are the parts in between the stone. You'd have to match this particular joint with the existing. And after we assessed that, we'd notice certain cracks in the stone. Obviously, you cannot replace every stone in a building. It just wouldn't work. So we would take sections out, they're called Dutchmen, and take these particular sections and you cut them out just right and you tool them perfectly so that they match the existing structure. And that was a job in itself. Some people worked really hard. It was a very hard job to do.
Perhaps the highlight of Grand Central's magnificent facade is Jules Coutin's neoclassical sculpture, which symbolizes the triumph of the railroad. The sculpture, entitled Transportation, depicts Mercury, the god of commerce and travel, supported by Minerva and Hercules, representing mental and moral strength.
The most important part of the phasing of the actual stonework was the sculpture roof, where there's a series of Mercury, Hercules, and Minerva. The problem was that a lot of it deteriorated and it would cause a cracking in the actual structure. So you would have to cut the structure back, pin it, and put what we would call a Dutchman, which is basically another word for saying a replacement piece of stone. But when you replace a piece of stone like this Indiana limestone, you have to have it perfectly matched. But the structure itself, the sculptures, they became beautiful. If you look, you'll see Hercules. You could almost feel Hercules move his hand. If you're way above and you look from the top and you feel that Mercury, when his arm would move over, when the scaffold you think would shift, I'm sure it didn't really shift, but you would feel that it would shift. And what we did with Minerva was we took her scribe, and she's next to a tablet or a book, and you could see her scribe, like a pen, so to say. And we changed the whole tip of that pen. So you know it came out, just right, just perfect.
Another major challenge in the Grand Central restoration was cleaning and regilding the 13-foot wide stained glass clock located beneath Mercury's feet on the 42nd Street facade. This brilliant timepiece is one of the terminal's many gems meant to evoke feelings of civic pride and appreciation for Western architecture by those who pass through Grand Central.
And then the other major phase of it was the clock. The clock itself is beautiful. The clock is a series of colors that you don't really get to see until we've actually finished the work. There's a series of blues and reds. They're beautiful. We took a gelding, a gold gelding, which is literally gold leaf, and pounded the gold leaf into the existing clock to bring out that fascia or the gold. That was a job in itself. The gold leaf would fly. We'd set up tents. That was a beautiful part of the project, but it worked out nice. And if you look, the clock stays. The clock works perfectly. We kept it at 6:30 for a year, and it moved very nicely. Everything worked out well.
Grand Central Terminal was completed in 1913. It replaced the original Grand Central Rail Station, which only received steam engine trains and was considered outdated. The current terminal almost met a similar fate in the 1970s, when developers sought to erect a huge tower over the existing site. But the Grand Central we know today was saved by a Supreme Court decision declaring it a historic landmark. The building has now been restored for future generations.
The biggest problem is natural environmentally, it's the birds. You run across bird guano that is inside the stone and you cannot get it out. So if you notice any imperfections, it's not for lack of effort or lack of knowledge of cleaning the building, it's just the natural way the stone will be, and you will not replace these particular giant blocks of stone. So after the project is completed, you'll see different areas that have either maybe a darker spot or a lighter spot than the other, and that's just the natural way of the stone. So all in all, the building came out beautiful. At least I think it came out beautiful. Everybody worked really hard.